and why you call yourself a code craftsman?
So I'm an independent consultant from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and I primarily do .NET development for government and public companies as well. And I call myself a code craftsman because I believe that craftsmanship is something that we should be paying attention to in our software development, and it's something that we should be proud to do, and we should be building our software in a way such as the people who were doing woodwork in the past, who really feel and believe that they're doing the right thing and that they're building software or products that they can be extremely proud of.
For developers starting on projects with their own set of technical and professional problems, what do you advise as the most efficient way to get up to speed with code?
One of the really good ways to get up to speed on a new project when you're brought in as a developer is to go through the build script, if there is one, and it'll provide you with information about the architecture, the code design, and the deployment decisions that needed to be made. I think that other alternative methods such as pair programming and reading documentation or just reviewing code by itself are good to do, but they don't provide the full breadth of knowledge that you need. One thing that going through a build script doesn't give you is the social aspect of the project. And as a developer on a project, that you have a lot of social problems that are inherent, and you don't understand how different groups work together just by reading through code or a build script. And for that, you'll need to get into meetings or pair programming or some other avenue that provides you with face-to-face time with someone who has the experience in that environment.
What are the strategies developers should consider to make it incremental movement to improve a project's ecosystem and practices?
So strategies to improve the ecosystem and practices should be focused around incremental growth. Trying to jump into a project and doing a big bang is not going to be successful. You'll end up either annoying or failing in a very spectacular fashion. One of the things that you can do incrementally is just start with the small things. Initially, when I go onto projects, what I like to do is pay attention to what's going on, the pain points that people are seeing, the things that are obviously not working well. What we can do after that is take steps to resolve those issues. So the more obvious a pain point is, the more likely that you will want to address that immediately at the beginning of a project. As you go through this list, I like to refer to it as a backlog of pain points, which is a lot like a backlog of features and tasks that you have to work on the project. So you have this backlog of pain points, work through it from the most obvious and most painful ones down through them over time as you can afford to invest resources and energy into it. After a while, you're going to be working on pain points that aren't so painful anymore, and it will be a fantastic feeling to know that you've resolved everything that's major.
Why is it important for developers to consider creating logical layers and seams in their code?
Logical layers and seams allows developers to create code in isolation from the rest of the application. So you'll be able to, with the creation of a seam, you'll be able to work within the gap between two seams. That'll give you the opportunity to build new features or to completely refactor a section without affecting the rest of the application. Another good thing that you get out of it is a start for separations of concern and the adherence to a single responsibility principle, which both of those things will give you much more testable code, much stronger code from a readability standpoint as well.
Why should .NET developers start paying attention to fundamental OO skills in their day-to-day jobs than ever before?
The fundamental OO skills are something that we learn when we're in school, and for some reason the .NET community has evolved in such a way that we've forgotten about them on many different levels, and we don't and haven't practiced them in our job environments. As a result, we're creating code that doesn't have long-term sustainability and maintainability within it. Paying attention to them is not a really difficult thing to do. They're out there, they're proven facts and practices. So we can go and look at past presentations, past speakers. There's a wealth of books that are out there that will help us to do this type of thing as well. And bringing them into our code allows us to more quickly evolve the code, change the code. It gives us reproducibility, repeatability, as well as reversibility, which is very important. As we all know, we work on projects where you build it one way and the client comes back and suggests that they would like to have it in a different fashion, in a different manner. And instead of being frustrated about the fact that you have to change one thing that cascades throughout the entire application base, you're able to change just one thing in isolation. And the OO practices that we've forgotten about allow us to do that.
Can you elucidate on two of the foundational principles for OO development, the single responsibility principle and separation of concerns, and the idea behind each of these principles?
So single responsibility and separation of concerns are very tightly tied together. I consider them to be foundational because a good adherence to single responsibility, separation of concerns allows you to take on many other tasks and patterns, practices very, very easily. So if you have good single responsibility, it's easy to apply dependency injection or the OCP principle, or apply a pattern such as something like the decorator pattern or a facade or something like that. It makes it much simpler because you're working with small pieces of code that have only one thing going on. Many times in the past when I've worked in code, I've been extremely proud of having the very large method or class, because the complexity seems like something I should have pride in accomplishing. Whereas the simplicity is really where we should be looking. If we can write something simple, it does one thing and one thing only, we can go ahead and take care of the changes that are required coming down in the future from client requests and or IT operations or architecture requests as well. Without those two fundamental things, everything else turns into a bit of a, I don't want to say disaster, but it makes things so much more difficult that it becomes a bit of a scramble to do anything anymore.
Why should developers use continuous integration in their projects? What problems can it solve, and what are the tools available to do this?
Continuous integration is a mechanism that enhances the ability to provide developers with feedback. The concept of feedback is the idea where we can have developers getting information back to them about the impact that their code has had on the rest of the code as well as on the client. So we can get feedback from the client, oh yes, you made that code work and the application work in the way that we've requested. You can also get feedback from the test team. Yeah, there are defects in it. No, there aren't defects in it. The concept of feedback works all the way down to a single developer working on their code in isolation, and they can run unit tests, or they can run a build script to check on compilation, and they can get that feedback really, really quickly. So continuous integration is a step in between releasing to the client and working in isolation yourself. You get really fast feedback about the fact that the code that you've written integrates well with the code that the rest of the development team has written, and that you know if there are problems in continuous integration, you're going to have long-term problems as well. So continuous integration is all about increasing the feedback loop to the developer. So,
what is the future roadmap as you see it for agile development and the OO paradigm?
The future roadmap for agile development, I think, involves a more positive uptake from business with agile development. One of the things that clients struggle with is the concept that we ask for a product and we have to wait for a total of 3 years before we see anything. And so the agile practice of releasing often and releasing early is something that clients like a lot. So I think that the uptake of agile within business is going to be the big thing that we see there. As far as OO, I think in .NET, what we really are going to see is the practice of developers paying attention to good OO. We've grown into this environment of drag and drop software development, and it's brought with it a lot of problems, and OO is going to take us back to the roots of writing good code And I think that we'll see that taken up by developers on a much more prevalent basis.
Thank you so much, Donald.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Donald.